And can you remind us all again how you know Mr. Kokumo and his role in the trial? I mean, everyone saw him as the exhibit guy, but
right.
was
Well, he was, you know, he was a lot more than the exhibit guy, and you know, I give him a hard time when he'd mess up the exhibits in court, but it wasn't just the exhibit guy in court. He was putting in long hours, the days, the nights while we were in court, getting all the stuff together for the next day in court. So it wasn't just in court that he was just press and play. He was, because Mr. Botts, let's just say he's not the most computer literate. I definitely am not. Brian is not. So we needed, Shaq was very important. But I met him when he was probably 16 or 17. I was at the Fulton County Public Defender's office. And it was him and two other young men that had a summer internship, and they were supposed to spend like one day with me and then go with someone else. And they just kind of like hung out with me all summer. Everyone started calling the three of them my children. And so, and then Shaq went to Georgia State for undergrad. So I would see him all the time, and he would stop by my office, and we stayed in contact. And then, you know, when I was going private, when I said, okay, I need to go private, I called him. I said, hey, man, do you know how to design a website for me? And then it was, hey, man, can you take some pictures for me for my website? And so then that was more the artistic creative side that he was in. And I knew he wanted to be in law school, go to law school. And then all of a sudden this indictment came down. And one of the people that worked with Brian, Griffin Lale, was going to law school. So it was like he was going to have to be replaced. And I said, Brian, I know this guy named Shaq. He doesn't have any legal training, but he's one of those guys that's like a jack of all trades. He knows how to do everything. And then all of a sudden he's on the team. It just happened like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's great. I saw him get on the interview with the jurors that Melanie did. But of course, one other interview that we've seen with the jurors is the alternate, who seemed to take a different stance on things and even indicated she might push a hung jury because of wanting to be not guilty. Did you anticipate that when you were over the trial? Because I mean, as you full well know, 12 people, or I guess it was 15 that you had, or 16, right, aren't going to all have the same opinion. Did you kind of sense who might be for and against you?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. You were not super surprised when you heard that alternate talk?
No.
I was not.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I saw Thugger Daily say that I saw Thugger Daily say that it's the fact that she was an alternate is proof that God might be real. So, and that's all you have to focus on, right? Is that she was not on the jury.
Well, you know, everyone's entitled to her opinion, and she sat for a year, so certainly she's entitled to her opinion. But we were aware of who the alternates were, and I, you know, there was another alternate that I think would have been probably, if you asked me before the verdict, if I were to say who I want on the jury the most, it was another one of the alternates who I think was on the other show. She was off camera, but I know who she is. And I felt that she was our strongest juror, but she was just an alternate. So I knew that she wasn't going to take part in the deliberations, but so it cut both ways. We had people we liked that were alternates as well.
Yeah. See, somebody says, thank you, Max, for being a blessing to SB. And I know Doug Weinstein got into that in his closing about Diamante Kendrick, that you're up against the state. And of course he had help from a couple attorneys too, but in the end, it was always just him up there. I mean, Diamante only had him, and it was the same situation with you two. So kind of the, just the spotlight of the trial is able to kind of get you guys the thanks you deserve from around the.
Well, thank you. And Doug, you know, I met Doug during this trial. I didn't know Doug beforehand. And Doug's openly said this. This was Doug's first criminal case, which is ridiculous.
So, not just first criminal trial. He'd never done a criminal case before.
No, I think it's first criminal trial.
Okay.
But he you know, he's had like 100 different jobs, and he just recently became a criminal defense attorney. But when we were planning the closings, we wanted 2 hours, but the judge said she was going to give the state 6 hours. So the way myself and Doug, we talked about it, and I knew Doug wanted to kind of give a more touchy-feely, humanizing closing. So the understanding was I was going to use some of his time, and I was just going to go through everything I had to say about every piece of evidence.
Yeah.
And in the midst of that, of course, I was going to talk about the Donovan Thomas case where our clients were tethered. So what I said, attacking the credibility of Mr. Copeland and Mr. Zachary and the lack of corroboration and the investigation and McDonald's video and all that stuff, was going to apply to Yak as well. So then Doug was able to kind of focus on more of the closing he wanted to give, which was more of the emotional side, which I thought was very effective.
Yeah, that's what I told Doug before the closing. That day, that morning, I said, you know, just be yourself. They like you the way you are. Be yourself. Don't listen to what other people have told you about how to do a closing or what to say. You just do what you feel is best. And he thanked me after it was over, and obviously he did a great job. And Max did an unbelievable job.
Well, thank you. But
I say this because he knows that I'm retiring.
It's the last rodeo.
Well, I'm ready to go out now, but I was practicing law before Max was born. But I have seen, I have seen what a great lawyer that he is, because we first met on this trial.
Oh, really?
And at first, I was impressed at his amazing memory. When we first met at the jail, he was able to get on the computer and go through and tell Shannon all the witnesses that were in the case, all the co-defendants. I said, how did you know all that? And he had probably only read it one time and knew it. And he's got a photographic memory toward people and events and stuff like that. I'm more of knowing more about people than about the law. But he's just been a great lawyer, did an unbelievable job, and I would not put anybody above him as the best, other than right now, he is the best there is. Yeah. And so I am more than glad to refer all my future business to Max, as long as it pays.
Well, you know, going back to Doug, I think Doug, and thank you, Mr. Boss, that was sweet.
You're welcome.
But going back to Doug, I think Doug probably would have, you know, I think the jurors said, oh, Max was going to fight for Shannon. And that's true. But Doug was the right person to give the emotional thing, because I think if there was a popularity contest, not who's going to fight, not, you know, who's the smartest, but just who do we like the best? Who's the nicest guy? I think Doug probably would have won that vote to the jurors. So, so I think Doug was the right person to give that part of, and I think I was the right person to give we're going to fight the evidence part.
Yeah. I always say you can't really decide if a closing argument is good or bad until after the jury verdict comes back, right?
That is true. That is true.
It was the best
although when you're sitting there waiting on a verdict, you know, there's so many things that you're like, oh, I wish I said that. I wish I said that. I wish I said that. Especially after you hear this. You know, George, for the people listening, George is a little different. You know, we did not call any witnesses. So in some states, we would have had the last closing. So we would have had the last word. But Georgia, I think that it used to be that way in Georgia.
It used to be.
But Georgia changed the law, so the state always has the last.
Yeah, always has the last.
Nerve-wracking. Right. So it's nerve-wracking when you try to condense, because you can't talk for 2 days. So you try to condense it and focus on what's important, but then something that you left on the cutting room floor, like when the state tried to say that Shannon cleaned the car because there was little drops on the. Now I knew that was from the application of the tint when they spray the window. And, that was one of those things that I didn't talk about because just time constraints. That was one of the things I didn't think was that central that needed to be discussed. But then the state saying, oh, he tried to wash the car and look at the marks on the car. And I knew that wasn't the case. I knew what that was. And I was like, man, I should have said that. But, it's always hindsight 2020 with those things.